Hey gentlefolk, my name is Malte Krug. Welcome back to another episode of All About Keys. This time I will show you 2 units of my collection, although one of them is one of my favorite keyboards ever. I'll show it only briefly, because using its functions in depth require dealing with a very cryptic user interface worth its own video. And I guess that even in the day, a lot of people basically used this unit only for its remarkable keyboard. Like I still do. The other one is the second MIDI hardware sequencer in this series, this time made by Korg. But first, let's see what this month's issue of the German keyboard magazine had to offer 40 years ago. The aforementioned sequencer from Korg is featured by a tiny picture on the cover of this issue. The majority of space is taken up by a 1980s style splash panel art. I guess somebody had a friend with an airbrush. And like every time, this starts with a content list and the letters to the editor. Nothing here this time to point out. Before the regular news section, here are some brand new items that got presented on 1985's Summer NAMM in New Orleans. Korg presented their new flagship synthesizer DW8000, which in comparison to its smaller brother the 6000 contains more digitized waveforms and a velocity-sensitive keyboard. Which isn't very good, by the way. More of this machine when it will get tested in this magazine. Kurzweil released an expander version of their famous K250 sample player, which just looks like a K250 with a cut-off keyboard. The keyboard in this picture is their version of a MIDI master keyboard. Linn announced a floppy drive for the Linn 9000 and the 9000 sequencer as a rack hardware unit. This sequencer actually gets tested in this magazine in a few months, but I never had seen one in the wild. I'm not sure how many got made. If one of you has info about this Linn sequencer or has worked with it, please leave a comment down below. I'm curious to hear about this. EMU showed this sound designer software for the Emulator 2 and Apple Macintosh, and the SP12 drum computer gets announced. Sequential Circuits cancelled their booth. According to this, because their new sampler, the Prophet 2000, wasn't ready yet. This picture shows a synthesizer called Split 8, which got released as the last of their cheaper line of synthesizers made for multi-timbral use with MIDI sequences. Oberheim's Matrix 6 is also worth mentioning. ROLAND introduced the TR-727, which is the percussion body of the TR-707. Similar concept Korg used with the DDM-110 and 220, and which I dealt with in this video here. And Yamaha did the same with the RX21 and RX21L a little later. Akai presented the smaller brother to the AX80, the AX60. The VX90 never got released in this shape, and I mentioned this plus more prototypes that never got released in 1985's Music Messe news in this video here. In the regular news, we get a full page about the new Versi Mark I synthesizer. You will see and hear more of this synthesizer when it gets tested in this magazine. The first artist interview this month is with Milan Williams from the Commodores, followed by another one with Michael Rother, an experimental musician from Germany who also has been in Kraftwerk for a short while around 1971. After a break of a few months, the technology feature is back, with an analog interface for the ZX Spectrum home computer. This is for sequencing analog synthesizers by gate and CV signals. A few months ago in May, the first part of the article about how velocity sensitivity is realized in historic mechanical keyed instruments has been published. This time they show how it can be done in electronic keyboards, and they explain how to achieve this in 2 ways, with analog or digital components. This MIDI sequencer software, called SoftTrack 16 Plus, made by C-Lab for the Commodore 64 computer, can be seen as the oldest ancestor of what we know now as Apple Logic. The sound börse this time contains sounds for the usual 1980 suspects and a patch sheet for the Moog Prodigy. In this combined long test, 6 different keyboard amps get compared. According to the test, these are aiming at keyboard players who can't or don't want to afford a PA system for amplifying their keyboards, or who don't want to break their backs dragging all those heavy components around. And here we have one of my favorite keyboards ever. And it's my favorite not because of its MIDI functions, but for the keypad. The Yamaha KX88 MIDImasterkeyboard. This is a large and heavy thing, built like a tank. I bought a second one just so I don't have to drag it around for rehearsals. I'll show you some of the features in a moment once we're done with the content of the magazine, but the focus will be on a different machine. The workshops start with Hubertus Ma's DX7 programming, trying to come up with a horn sound from scratch. Here's the patch sheet as usual. And here we have part 3 of the workshops about recording peripherals, this time about delay and reverb, starting with explaining the nature of these effects and how they got simulated in the days before widely available digital effects units. And in 1985 those were new and mostly not affordable for the regular hobby recording engineer. Spring reverbs, plate halls, tape echoes, among others, are the older techniques and get mentioned here. In this workshop, they suggest a possible way of setting up the wiring of an 8-track studio with a mixer and basic peripherals, including a 2-track master machine. I owned none of these items when I bought this magazine. I started off with a professional synth and recording 2 years later, when I finally managed to have some extra money for this. Music Theory Basics is about the 13th chord this time. I got lessons about this during the 90s. The home computer workshop gives us another chance of typing off long lists of code for a MIDI multitrack recording module for a bigger sequencer project. This has never been my cup of tea, and I didn't own a computer anyway. In Jazz Piano we get some practice lessons for a better finger control to better phrase playing. The piano workshop contains part 1 about keyboarder and producer Robbie Buchanan, and I mean producer in the original sense. It offers us a full script of a piece he played for an Amy Grant album. And again, the drum computer workshop adds the drum patterns for the aforementioned song, before the flea market closes the magazine. And here we have the other unit I would like to feature today, the second MIDI-sequencer in hardware form of this video series, the Korg SQD1. Okay. Here we have the KX88 as the keyboard I will use to get data into the Korg SQD1, the featured unit of this month. I'll make a special video featuring the KX88 because I already mentioned this. I really like it. Mostly though for the keyboard Yamaha used, and as far as I know only can be found in one other synthesizer, the Korg T1. Yamaha did hold shares of Korg in those days, just in case you're wondering. Maybe the keyboard can also be found in one of the PF series electronic pianos, but I only own the PF2000, which I just got recently and had no chance to open up yet. The KX88 has some features that complement the Yamaha synths of the day, namely the DX synthesizers and the TX816, as you might see by the aesthetics of its front panel. I'll show in set video what is possible with this combination. Of course, Yamaha tried to keep you in their system, so features that allowed you to control foreign gear in detail got dialed down a bit. The KX88, or its smaller brother the KX76, which only has a slightly smaller synthesizer like keyboard, can of course work with any MIDI-compatible equipment. But the possibility of using MIDI-sysx data for remote editing gear from other manufacturers is limited to 2 controller strings. More of this in the special video. But now for this month's main star, so to speak, the Korg SQD1 hardware sequencer. As you can see, it's a bit smaller than the Yamaha sequencer flagship, the QX1, which I fiddled around with here. But let's get rid of the QX1, it already had its moment in the spotlight. This is the SQD's brother in crime with a similar design, the Korg DDD1 drum computer, which got released a short time after the sequencer, and I will get to it in detail later in this series. For not being anachronistic, we have to dial down a bit. Korg's drum computer at the time has been the DDM110, and I showed it in detail here. But in conjunction with the SQD1 it can finally be synchronized to other gear using DeanSync. The SQD1 has the basic functions of Korg synchronizer KMS30 built in. So for a home recording studio running one of those new 4-track cassette recorders, we can save money getting 2 units in one. If you would like to see in a video how that got done in the day, combining tape recorders, MIDI sequencers and drum computers, leave a comment down below. That's enough for the theory part. I will go a bit more modern with the sound generator for this demonstration, so I don't have to set up various synthesizers. I will use this. The ROLAND SonicCell is a multi-timbral sound module from 2007 based on the Phantom series of workstation synthesizers, and will do just fine. The SQD1 works a bit differently than the already mentioned QX1, which has 8 individual tracks for recording MIDI data. The SQD1 has only 2, the so-called main and the subtrack. The basic workflow is to record on the subtrack first, and as soon as we are happy with what we've played, its content gets bounced onto the main track. This main track still does differentiate between the 16 individual MIDI channels, so it's still possible to send MIDI data to the different receivers, whatever they might be. In this case, the SonicCell. Let's look at the front panel. All functions can be reached using this matrix and the buttons at the side and the bottom. There are 5 main modes: play mode, real-time and step recording, the edit mode, and data transfer. The latter is used for dealing with a floppy drive or MIDI dumping of the memory content to and fro a computer. These so-called 2.8-inch quick disks were used in those days for cheaper gear that wasn't worthy of a proper 3.5-inch floppy drive, I guess. Akai used them in their early samplers S612 and S700, and you can find them in ROLAND's S10, MKS100 and S220 samplers. The only Yamaha unit with this kind of drive I know of is this MIDI data filer MDF1. Version 2 and 3 used 3.5-inch floppies. One side of this floppy can hold a full memory of the sequencer of 15,000 events. This halves when you want to record dynamics. The SQD1 even allows to make backups of your floppies directly, which is a nice and helpful feature that saves time, so you don't have to load songs individually to save on different floppies. The setup is simple. The KX88's MIDI out is connected to the SQD1's MIDI in. One of the 2 identical MIDI outs of the SQD is wired to the SonicCell's MIDI in. With one of the microswitches at the back of the SQD1, I can enable a MIDI through function to allow MIDI data to go directly through from MIDI in to MIDI out. In addition to recorded data, that is. This way I can actually hear what I'm playing before it's recorded. This is a function the much larger and more expensive QX1 lacks. Allowing MIDI through to the MIDI outs. It doesn't matter which MIDI channel we are using to record into the sequencer, some of the synthesizers of the day could only send on one MIDI channel anyway. The DX7, for example. The data on the subtrack, remember, that is our work track, gets converted to whatever MIDI channel we want when bounced onto the main track. So the intended tone generator gets the right data. It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty easy. I will show you in a sec. The rest of the front houses the display. And with this switch here, we alter its content between tempo, remaining memory, and the location of the sequence. By the way, the SQD1 works only in tape machine mode. You have to record everything from start to finish, or copy parts you want to have repeated over time in the song. Having pen and paper ready can be helpful to remember which bars contain what part of the song. The second switch is for switching between the various clock modes. Internal clock is the important one for regular use of this unit. If you're wondering why the sequencer doesn't play or record, check here if the switch isn't making the SQD wait for an external clock signal. External sync is for switching the SQD into slave mode for clock impulses that come in through the DIN sync sockets. MIDI is for MIDI clock reception, and the SQD recognizes MIDI song position pointer as well, which is handy. And tape sync to receive timecode back that you recorded earlier onto tape using this machine. This switch down here is for the metronome and its 2 volumes. The click we will hear is coming from the output in the back of the SQD, not the built-in little speaker. At the back we thankfully have a fixed power cord with an internal power supply, and farther over here all the needed connections. 1 MIDI in and 2 identical MIDI outs, the DIN sync and tape sync sockets. On this SQD1 a previous owner swapped those mini jack sockets for RCAs. The click output and 2 foot switch sockets for a hands-free operation of recording and play stop. This set of microswitches, in Germany these are called MIDisequencer, is for enabling the MIDI through function, switching filters for key velocity, bender or aftertouch, and the 5th one for choosing the storage device, disk or MIDI dump. Okay, let's start with a real-time recording. Quantization is only possible before the recording, so I have to check the resolution here. For the intended drum pattern, I will use a resolution of 16th. You have to hold the button and then the up-down button to alter settings. I will switch the KX88 to send on MIDI channel 10 so I can hear the right sound while playing. I don't want to play a drum pattern on piano sound. MIDI channel 10. The first recording into an empty SQD1 will always happen onto the main track directly, because the main track determines the length of the song. The recordings on the subtrack can't be longer than the content of the main track. So let's do something like that. I'm going to do 140. This is for the tempo, but for some reason, I can't reach all the in-betweens. It's like steps of 4 to actually change the tempo. I got this on both of my SQD1s, and I have no idea why it's not more detail-y. Okay, and other than on the QX1, we can actually stay in real-time recording and listening to what we recorded. I don't have to switch back to play mode. That obviously didn't work. Let's go to the beginning and record again. Really, because now we're actually overdubbing the first recording. That'll be gone. Let's hear from the beginning. Yep, and as you can see, we recorded longer than 4 bars. We recorded a 5th one, which I don't want to keep because I want to have 4 bars long pattern. Go into edit mode, delete. It says 5 because we're at the position of the 5th bar. Enter, and it's gone. But I wanted 8 bars long, so we can copy. By the way, erase just erases content of a bar, not the bar itself. So if you recorded something and you just messed up one thing in the middle somewhere, you can erase that of an already done recording when it's on the main track. And on the subtrack, you can record what you wanted to punch in, so to speak. And then when bouncing it back on the main track, then you have exchanged the piece, so to speak. And even if you bounced various recordings onto the main track, you can still edit only the data of one channel at a certain spot of bar 16 or something. That's also still possible. You don't have to have the final recording and the final decision to make when you're bouncing subtracks onto main tracks. But now for the copying process. Edit mode, copying. Thing is, it'll only copy a bar at a time. And if that sounds tedious, it kind of is. And on the other hand, it isn't. We go to position 1 because we want to copy the first bar behind all the other ones into position 5. So we just copy it, copy, bar 1, enter. But now it automatically moved to the second bar. So I just do the same thing again. 3rd bar, 4th bar. There it is again. Another thing, what I want to do now, there it starts again from the beginning. But now what I want to do is, for example, putting a crash cymbal on the first quarter of the 5th bar. I'm going to switch to the subtrack, because when I would record on the main track again, I would just delete everything. And we go to the end or half of the 4th bar, because then I don't have to listen to all the stuff in the beginning. There's a crash cymbal, subtrack. There we got the crash cymbal. It's on 5-1, I guess. There it is. That is our first recording. And let me just show you how saving all this on floppy works, because once in a while you might mess things up and you want to go back to an earlier step in your recording process, and this is how it works. Before you actually can use one of these quick disks, you gotta initialize the disk, hit and hold the key, enter. There you go, that's it. If you want to save something, that thing is loud. It's possible to save 5 songs on the floppy, and I want to save this into spot number 1. Save 1, Enter. Takes a bit longer. And there we go. Now for the next part, I think I'm gonna torture the circle of fifth a bit for this. Let's play the piano. That is on channel 1, as far as I remember. So we're switching back to channel 1. There we go. Let's listen to this. Yeah, good for this. It was never supposed to be a masterpiece. So we're bouncing the piano onto the main track. And there we go. If we would listen to only the main track, we would have both instruments. There we go. Let's record the bass. From the start, of course, we're recording on the sub track. It's 16. Now for the step recording. This is pretty versatile. You can change resolution whenever you like, different note values. A higher resolution will result in shorter notes, for example, when combining them with a few rests. I'll show you in a bit. You can also tie notes for lengths of over one step or legato different notes. Chords are no problem either. Let me show you. Okay, from the start, but I don't want to start on the first beat. So let's put in rests. Those were 2 8s, so we're on the second quarter. Hold that note for a while. I have no idea where I am now harmonically. Tie it again. Tie that G again. So we got 4 bars full. Let's listen. I could go to 5 now, but if I start recording now, I would delete all the rest of the subtracks. So we have to bounce onto the main track, which we do. Now we go to 5 and record more on the subtrack. That was not too bad, actually. And now I'm gonna put into rests again. Tie, 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 rest, rest. Tie, tie. And now we're gonna bounce. And in this position, 7/3, I'm gonna change the resolution to 32s. And now I'm going to fill the rest of the pattern with a very long row of short notes. Recording. Tie, tie, tie. Rest, rest. Tie, tie, tie. Rest, rest, rest. And there we are. So let's listen to that. I guess at the end it will sound like as if I accidentally let my cat play the keyboard solo. Yeah, that's what I meant. But that's basically it. In a time before computers took over their place as the center of a recording studio, hardware sequencers like the Korg SQD1 helped to extend the count of those valuable tracks on your brand new 4-track cassette recorder. You only had to sacrifice one track for timecode purposes, and then you could get all your digital keyboards and drum computers controlled by this machine, while being able to record guitars and vocals later and in sync on tape. Owning a mixing desk was necessary though to get all those audio channels finalized onto 2 master tracks. And as you could see, having only 2 recording tracks to work with in the SQD1 isn't necessarily worse than what we have in larger models of the time, considering that we keep the possibility to alter individual recorded channels even after we bounced everything onto the main track. All in all, this machine basically works like a digital tape machine for MIDI devices, not using the pattern structure like most drum computers do. And having a floppy drive as a mass storage device will keep you from being forced to use the established and time-consuming backup onto tape to free up the memory for new songs. Thanks for staying here with me for this long, and please consider to hit like, ring the bell and subscribe to this channel for not missing out on more videos being published soon on All About Keys.